Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became a demon king instead of a hero. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The wind that whipped across the rooftop felt like a thief. It stole the warmth from Izuku Midoriya's skin, the breath from his lungs, and the last, flickering ember of hope from his soul. Below, the city of Muzutafu sprawled out, a vibrant tapestry of life and dreams he was no longer a part of. The setting sun bled orange and purple across the horizon, casting long, skeletal shadows that reached for him like grasping fingers. It was beautiful, and it felt like a mockery. "No, I don't think you can be a hero without a quirk," the words echoed in the hollow space where his heart used to be. They hadn't been shouted. They hadn't been delivered with malice. They had been spoken with a tired, pragmatic finality by the one man Izuku believed would understand. All Might. The symbol of peace. His hero. The man whose smile was supposed to make everything okay, but the smile was gone, replaced by a gaunt, skeletal visage wreathed in steam. And the words were a verdict. A death sentence for a dream he had nurtured for 14 agonizing years. Izuku's knees hit the gritty concrete of the rooftop with a dull thud. His bright yellow backpack, a childish beacon of optimism, slid from his shoulder and landed beside him. Inside, his hero analysis for the future number 13 felt as heavy as a tombstone. Every page, every detailed drawing, every strategic note, all of it was just the pathetic scrawling of a delusional child playing pretend. He replayed the moment, the memory a fresh, weeping wound. All Might, deflated and bleeding from the mouth, explaining the limits of his own mortality. He'd shown Izuku his gruesome wound, a cratered ruin of flesh hidden beneath his shirt. It was a plea for understanding, a stark lesson in the brutal reality of the hero world. "Even I am this broken," the Wound had screamed. "What chance do you have? It's not bad to dream, young man." The hero had added, a pathetic, conciliatory bandage on a mortal wound. "But you have to be realistic." Realistic. The word was acid. For his entire life, being realistic was the weapon everyone else had used against him. The doctors who'd diagnosed him as quirkless. The teachers who'd pitted him. The classmates who'd tormented him. And Kaken, who had used his explosive power to carve the word useless into Izuku's very being. Izuku had defied them all. He had clung to the dream with the desperation of a drowning man. He had studied, he had trained his body, he had analyzed heroes with a devotion that bordered on religious. He believed, with every fiber of his being, that a hero was defined by their actions, not their powers. He just needed one person, just one, to believe it too, and he had chosen the wrong person. He had pinned all his hope on a symbol, and the man beneath it had simply let the dream fall. All Might had left him there. After delivering the final, crushing blow, he had walked to the stairwell door, advising Izuku not to try and follow him again. The clang of the metal door shutting was the sound of a mausoleum being sealed. Izuku was alone. Utterly and completely alone. He pushed himself up, his legs trembling. He walked to the chain-link fence at the edge of the roof, his fingers curling around the cold, unforgiving metal. The city lights began to flicker to life below, a galaxy of possibilities that were now all dead to him. He could see the tiny figures of people moving along the sidewalks, living their lives, secure in the knowledge that heroes were watching over them. It was a world he had desperately wanted to protect, a world that had no place for him. A thought, cold and insidious, slithered into his mind. It wasn't a product of anger or passion. It was born of the absolute, crushing emptiness. Kaken's words from earlier that day returned to him, no longer sounding like a cruel taunt, but like a genuine piece of advice. "If you want to be a hero so bad, there's a quick way to do it. Just take a swan dive off the roof and pray you'll be born with a quirk in your next life." Izuku's grip on the fence tightened, his knuckles white. Would it be so easy? To just let go? To trade this suffocating reality for a sliver of a chance at the next? The abyss below wasn't just a drop. It was an invitation. An end to the pain, the pity, the relentless, grinding feeling of being less. He didn't cry. The tears had frozen somewhere deep inside him, a solid lump of grief in his chest. He just stared, his green eyes, once so full of life and determination, now as dull and empty as sea-worn glass. Boom! The sound ripped through the evening air, a concussive blast that vibrated through the soles of his shoes. It came from a few blocks away. Izuku's head snapped up, his gaze drawn to the plume of black smoke rising into the twilight sky. An explosion. A villain attack. His body moved before his mind did. It was pure instinct, a Pavlovian response honed over a decade of hero worship. He scrambled across the roof to the edge that overlooked the incident, his heart, that stupid, traitorous organ, beginning to pound with a familiar, frantic rhythm. He saw it immediately. The chaos. The street was choked with onlookers, their phones held high like offerings to a disaster. Pro-heroes were on the scene, Death Arms, Kamui Woods, Backdraft, but they were being held back. The villain. Izuku's blood ran cold. It was him. The sludge villain. The same one that had attacked him, that All Might had captured in a soda bottle. He must have dropped it when I grabbed onto his leg, Izuku realized with a sickening lurch. This is my fault. The guilt was a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. The villain had taken a hostage. It was thrashing in the villain's viscous grip, explosions popping erratically from its flailing hands. The explosions were small, muffled by the sludge, but they were unmistakable. The spiky blonde hair, the familiar school uniform. It was Kaken. The sight broke through Izuku's stupor. He saw Death Arms unable to get a grip. He saw Kamui Woods' vulnerability to the spreading fires. He saw the heroes standing there, waiting for someone with the right quirk to show up, while his childhood friend, his tormentor, his rival, the person who had defined so much of his life, was suffocating, and a horrible, familiar feeling surged through him. The desperate, burning need to do something. His legs tensed, ready to run, to find the stairs, to get down there and help. But All Might's voice echoed in his head, a cold, iron chain wrapped around his limbs. You can't be a hero, be realistic. He was quirkless. A Deku. Useless. What could he possibly do? Throw his backpack? He'd tried that before. It had done nothing. He would just get in the way. He would die, a pathetic, meaningless death that would prove everyone right. He stood frozen, a spectator on a rooftop, watching the scene unfold like a detached observer. He watched Kaken's struggles weaken. He watched the fear in his explosive rival's eyes, a raw, primal terror Izuku had never seen there before. And as he watched, his own despair, the vast, bottomless ocean of it, began to churn. This was the world. A world where the powerful stood by because it wasn't convenient for them to act. A world where a boy was dying in the street, surrounded by heroes, because none of them were the right hero. A world where a dream was a sickness and reality was a cage. A world that had judged him, found him wanting, and cast him aside. The despair was no longer just sadness. It was a cold, hard, perfect thing. A black diamond of absolute hopelessness crystallizing in the center of his being. He wasn't just sad for himself anymore. He was despairing for this broken, hypocritical world. For Kaken, who was so strong yet so helpless. For the heroes, who were so powerful yet so impotent. For All Might, a dying god propping up a corrupt faith. His despair was so immense, so pure, it became a presence. A gravity well? A beacon in a dimension of shadows, calling out to something ancient and hungry, and something answered. It started not as a voice, but as a thought that felt alien in his own mind. A whisper of static at the edge of his consciousness. Such exquisite despair, a vessel worthy of a crown. Izuku blinked, shaking his head. Grief was making him hear things. He focused back on the scene below. Kaken's movements were sluggish now. The light from his explosions was fading. He was dying. It was Izuku's fault. It was All Might's fault. It was the world's fault. The whisper grew louder, coiling around his own thoughts, speaking with a resonance that vibrated in his very bones. They have forsaken you. The voice was deep, ancient, and utterly calm. It wasn't in his ears, it was in his soul. Izuku's breath hitched. He looked around the empty rooftop, but he knew the source wasn't external. The man you call the god left you here to wallow in your own weakness. The boy you call a friend is a tyrant who grinds you under his heel. The world you wish to save sees you as nothing more than a stone in the road. Every word was true. Every word was a hammer blow against the crumbling foundations of his spirit. What are you? Izuku whispered, his voice hoarse. I am the potential you were denied. I am the power that lies dormant in the hearts of the subjugated. I am the will to impose order on chaos. The voice paused, its tone turning from declaration to seduction. They call you worthless. But I see your potential. I see a king. As the last word echoed in his mind, something within him fractured. A dam of human frailty burst, and a torrent of dark energy flooded the empty channels of his being. It was a cold fire, an agony that was indistinguishable from ecstasy. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the roar of power erupting from his core. His vision swam. Black and emerald light bled from his pores, cloaking him in a terrible aura. He felt it, a vast, sleeping power awakening, stretching its limbs after a slumber of eons. It latched onto his despair, his intelligence, his burning desire to change the world, and made them its own. He looked at his hands. Thin, black lines, like cracks in obsidian, were spreading across his skin, creeping up from his wrists. They felt like a part of him, a visible manifestation of the abyss that had opened inside. He stumbled back to the edge of the roof, his legs now steady, strong. He looked down at the chaos below, and for the first time, he did not feel helpless. He felt clarity. The voice, now intertwined with his own thoughts, spoke again. That boy will die. The heroes will watch. The world will continue to spin on its axis of failure. Or you can descend. You can show them what true power is. Not the power to smile and punch, but the power to command. The power to rule. Izuku looked at Kaken's terrified face, at the useless heroes, at the jeering, pathetic villain. He saw the world not as something to save, but as a broken machine that needed to be dismantled and rebuilt. The choice was laughably simple. He stepped up onto the ledge. The wind no longer felt like a thief. It felt like a subject, bowing before him. Accept your crown, Izuku Midoriya. The voice purred. Become the sovereign. Izuku did not jump. He did not fall. He stepped forward into the air, a king stepping down from his dais. He descended. For a moment, the crowd below thought someone had committed suicide. A figure plummeting from the rooftop. A few people screamed. A hero started to move, but Izuku did not splat. He landed with the force of a meteor. The asphalt cracked and buckled under the impact, a 10-foot crater of shattered pavement exploding outward from where he stood. A shockwave of pure, oppressive force rolled through the street. It wasn't physical, it was psychic. An aura of absolute dominance that silenced the crowd, froze the heroes, and made the very air grow heavy and cold. Izuku rose to his full height from the center of the crater. He was wreathed in a faint, pulsing shroud of black and green energy. His green hair, once a messy, cheerful mop, was now darker, almost black, with streaks of venomous emerald that seemed to absorb the light. His eyes, once wide and innocent, now blazed with a malevolent, internal green fire. The black, crack-like markings had crept up his neck, just visible above the collar of his scorched school uniform. He looked like a nightmare. What the hell? Death Arms grunted, taking a step forward before his body locked up. It wasn't his muscles that failed him, it was his will. The sheer presence of the boy was crushing, a palpable weight of ancient dread that screamed prey at the most primal part of his brain. Izuku ignored them all. His burning gaze was fixed on the sludge villain. The villain, sensing a new and infinitely greater threat, tightened its grip on Bakugo, a slimy approximation of a sneer on its face. Get back, you brat! Or I'll kill him. Izuku began to walk. His footsteps were silent, yet each one seemed to shake the ground. He moved with an unearthly grace, not the clumsy, anxious shuffle of the boy he had been, but the measured, deliberate stride of a predator. Stop! Don't get any closer! He's just a kid! A hero yelled, but their voice was thin, pathetic. The sludge villain panicked. It tried to lash out, to form a tendril of sludge to strike the approaching boy. But the sludge felt sluggish, uncooperative. Izuku raised a single, slender hand, his fingers outstretched. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His will was now a weapon. From the villain's perspective, the world went cold. The boy's glowing green eyes seemed to see straight through its fluid form, past the captured human, and into its very essence. It felt a strange, invasive energy probing it, analyzing the biological makeup of its quirk, the way its body could liquefy and reform. It was like being pinned on a biologist's table, dissected by a gaze alone. And then, that gaze became contemptuous. A parasite. Izuku's voice echoed, not in the air, but directly inside the villain's gelatinous mind. A mindless collection of stolen fluids and base instinct. Unworthy, the villain felt a pull. A fundamental unraveling. The very power that allowed it to exist, its quirk, was being corrupted. Twisted. Torn apart at a molecular level. It tried to hold itself together, but it was like trying to cup water in a sieve. Its fluid body began to stiffen, to lose cohesion. Patches of it hardened into a brittle, gray substance, then crumbled away into fine, lifeless dust. It gurgled, a sound of pure terror, its form rapidly disintegrating. Katsuki Bakugo felt the pressure around him vanish. Sludge that had been forcing its way down his throat turned to ash on his tongue. He fell to his knees on the hot pavement, gasping, choking, his lungs burning as they drew in their first clean breath in minutes. His vision was blurry, his ears ringing. The world swam back into focus, and the first thing he saw was a pair of familiar, ridiculously oversized red sneakers. He looked up, and his heart stopped. It was Deku. But it wasn't. The figure standing over him was wreathed in that terrifying dark energy. The freckled face he had punched and sneered at his entire life was now a cold, emotionless mask of regal authority. And the eyes? Bakugo had seen Deku cry 1,000 times. He had seen fear in those eyes, and on rare occasions, a flicker of stupid, useless defiance. He had never seen this. He had never seen this cold, merciless judgment. It was the look of a god staring at an insect. The Deku he knew was gone, and this creature, this thing, was wearing his skin. The fear he'd felt while suffocating was nothing compared to the absolute, soul-deep terror that gripped him now. This was not a hero. This was not a villain. This was something else entirely. Izuku looked down at the gasping, terrified form of Katsuki Bakugo. He felt no pity. No anger. No satisfaction. He felt nothing but a distant, analytical curiosity. This was the boy who had been a mountain in his life. Now, he was just a pebble at his feet. With the sludge villain reduced to a pile of gray dust scattered on the wind, a heavy silence fell over the street. The fires still crackled, but all sound from the crowd had died. The heroes were statues, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. A quirkless, suicidal boy had just leaped from a building, landed like an artillery shell, and obliterated a villain with a gesture and a look. It was impossible. "I am here!" The roar was a thunderclap. All Might, in his full, glorious muscle form, landed between Izuku and the heroes, his signature smile fixed on his face, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of deep confusion. He had seen the explosion, felt the tremor of the boy's landing, and rushed to the scene. He took in the situation in a second, the villain gone, the young man from the rooftop safe, but the crowd and heroes paralyzed with fear, staring at a child. "Have no fear, citizens!" All Might boomed, his voice straining to project confidence. "For I am here. The situation is under control." He turned to face the boy he had shattered on the rooftop, his smile unwavering. "Young man, you are safe now. That was a reckless, foolish thing to do, but you are safe." Izuku did not flinch. He did not react with awe or relief. He simply looked at All Might. And for the first time, All Might felt his own smile falter. The boy's gaze was not that of a rescued civilian. It was not the starstruck adoration he'd seen earlier. It was a look of cold, piercing assessment. A look of utter disdain. In those glowing, emerald depths, All Might saw himself not as the symbol of peace, but as a hollow, gilded idol. He saw his own weakness, his hypocrisy, his failure, all reflected back at him with the weight of 1,000 years of judgment. The boy's eyes seemed to say, "You are a lie. And I am the truth." A chill, deeper and colder than any injury, snaked its way down All Might's spine. This was not the boy he had spoken to. The despair he had left on that roof had not faded, it had festered. It had been filled by something terrible. Young Midoriya? All Might asked, his voice losing its booming quality. Izuku's lips curved into the barest hint of a smile. It was a terrifying sight, devoid of all warmth, all humanity. It was the smile of a predator that had just realized it was at the top of the food chain. Without a word, he turned. The shadows in the alleyways and under the cars seemed to deepen, to writhe as if alive. They reached for him, swirling around his feet like a cloak. Wait! All Might shouted, taking a step forward. But there was nothing to wait for. Izuku Midoriya took one step into the encroaching darkness and simply vanished. The shadows receded, the oppressive aura lifted, and he was gone, leaving behind a cratered street, a traumatized crowd, a broken rival, and a deeply, profoundly shaken symbol of peace. All Might stood in the silence, the cheers of the crowd slowly, uncertainly starting to rise around him. He looked at the dust that was once a villain, at the trembling form of young Bakugo, and then at the empty space where the green-eyed monster had stood. He had told the boy he couldn't be a hero. He had no idea that in doing so, he had just unleashed a king. The 3 days following the incident were a strange, silent purgatory. The world outside Izuku Midoriya's bedroom window continued its frantic, colorful dance. News helicopters buzzed in the sky. TV reports ran endless loops of the cratered street, the terrified faces of the crowd, and the grainy, zoomed-in footage of a boy wreathed in darkness who had appeared, annihilated a villain, and vanished. They called him a vigilante, a new villain, a phantom. They had no name for him, no quirk registry, nothing but terrified eyewitness accounts that sounded like something out of a dark fantasy novel. Inside the bedroom, the world was still. It was a museum of a dead faith. The All Might posters that wallpapered the room seemed to mock him. There he was, the symbol of peace, in his Silver Age costume, fist raised in a triumphant declaration of victory. There he was again, in his Bronze Age suit, carrying a bus full of people on his back, his signature smile a beacon of impossible strength. And there, the largest poster of all, directly over his bed, All Might, standing tall, with the words, "You are next," emblazoned below him. It was a promise that had curdled into a curse. Izuku sat on the edge of his bed, the glow from his computer monitor casting his face in a pale, sterile light. He hadn't slept. Sleep was a luxury for a mind at peace, and his mind was a maelstrom of cold, crystalline clarity. The fear and confusion that had followed his rooftop transformation had evaporated, baked away by the cold certainty of the power now residing in his veins. He felt it constantly, a low hum beneath his skin, a whispering companion in the silence of his thoughts. He looked at his hands. The black, crack-like markings had not faded. They were a permanent part of him now, intricate patterns that started at his palms and snaked their way up his arms, disappearing under the sleeves of his black hoodie. They were beautiful, he thought with a strange detachment. Like volcanic rock, forever marked by the fire that forged it. He hadn't spoken to his mother. He couldn't. What would he say? How could he explain the void that had replaced the boy she knew? He had moved through the small apartment like a ghost, eating the food she left for him, avoiding her worried gaze, the unspoken questions hanging heavy in the air between them. He felt a pang of something, a distant echo of guilt, but it was quickly submerged by the vast, calm ocean of his new purpose. Sentiment was a weakness of the old world. She senses the change, the voice in his mind observed. It was no longer a startling intrusion but a constant presence, as natural as his own heartbeat. The mortal animal is always wary of the predator in its den. Izuku didn't answer aloud. Their communication had transcended speech. He simply thought, "She's my mother." She was the mother of the boy. The boy is gone. You are what remains. There was no malice in the voice, only an unassailable logic that Izuku found he could not refute. He was different now. The boy who cried at every setback, who scribbled fanboy notes in a journal, who chased a dream he was never meant to have, that boy had died on the rooftop. He had taken a swan dive not into the pavement, but into the abyss within himself. And something else had climbed out. He turned his attention back to the monitor. He had been researching. Not heroes. Not quirks in the way he used to. He was studying history. The rise and fall of empires. The philosophies of kings and conquerors. The nature of power, control, and order. He devoured information on Machiavelli, on Sun Tzu, on the consolidation of feudal Japan. His analytical mind, once dedicated to heroics, was now focused on the mechanics of rule. "What are you?" Izuku finally asked, directing the thought inward with sharp intent. "You call me a king. What does that make you? The crown?" A feeling of ancient amusement washed through him. "A crown is a mere symbol. I am the principle of sovereignty itself. An authority, where the chaotic energies of this world coalesce into what you call quirks, random, unpredictable, pointless bursts of power. I am the counterforce. I am the will to impose structure, to bring all things into a perfect, orderly system. An authority? Not a quirk? A quirk is a tool. A biological anomaly. A hammer, a torch, a parlor trick." The voice, the sovereign, explained with disdain. "An authority is a fundamental law of existence. I have slumbered for millennia, waiting for a vessel. A host whose will to forge order was so absolute, whose despair over the world's chaos was so profound, that they could bear the weight of my power." The pieces clicked into place in Izuku's mind. The sovereign wasn't a parasite that had found him. It was a power that had been drawn to him. His 14 years of yearning, of meticulous analysis, of desperate desire to protect the weak from the strong, it hadn't been a failed hero's application. It had been the perfect resume for a tyrant. "This world is sick," the sovereign continued, its voice a silken rumble in his consciousness, tapping into Izuku's own conclusions. "It is ruled by chaos. The strong, like your friend Katsuki Bakugo, prey on the weak. The powerful, like your idol All Might, offer hollow platitudes and maintain a broken status quo. They don't solve the problem, they perpetuate it. They fight the symptoms of a diseased society, but they never dare to cure the disease itself. The disease is choice. Unfettered free will. The random lottery of power." Izuku's eyes drifted to a poster of Endeavor, the number 2 hero, his face a permanent scowl amidst a maelstrom of fire. A man of immense power, known for his violent temper and the sheer collateral damage he left in his wake. Was he a force for order? Or was he just a bigger, state-sanctioned bully than Kaken? "I offer you the cure," the sovereign purred, its offer a final, binding contract. "The power to build a new world. Not on a foundation of flimsy hope, but on the bedrock of absolute control. A world where the strong no longer prey on the weak, because all will be weak before you. A world where no one is powerless, because you will be their power. A kingdom where every subject has their place, their purpose, all according to your design. True safety. True peace. True order. This is the promise of my power. This is your birthright as my king." Izuku closed his eyes. A part of him, a small, dying flicker of the boy he was, recoiled in horror. It was tyranny. Dictatorship. The very thing heroes fought against. But the sovereign was ready for that argument. It reached into his memories and twisted them. It showed him Kaken, his hands smoking, sneering down at him. It showed him the doctor, his face clinical and dismissive. It showed him All Might, gaunt and pitying, leaving him alone on the rooftop. "Where were the heroes for you, Izuku Midoriya?" it whispered. "Who protected you? Their system failed you. It fails millions every day. Those with weak quirks. Those with villainous quirks. The quirkless. They are all trampled under the feet of those who won the genetic lottery. Is that freedom? Or is it just a more chaotic, more painful form of slavery?" The last flicker of his old self was extinguished. The sovereign was right. The hero system wasn't about saving everyone. It was about preserving the hierarchy. His way, it would be cruel, yes, it would be absolute. But it would be fair. The fairness of the grave, perhaps, but fair nonetheless. Everyone would be equal beneath his heel. "I accept," Izuku thought. The pact was sealed not with blood, but with the cold, hard assent of his will. The energy in his veins pulsed with satisfaction. "Excellent. A king cannot rule from the shadows of his childhood bedroom. Your theoretical studies are complete. It is time for a practical lesson, your first royal decree. Your first act of subjugation. What do you want me to do?" "Power must be consolidated. Your authority allows you to analyze and corrupt the quirks of others. To take their power and make it your own. We will start small. There is a petty thief operating 2 blocks from here. His quirk allows him to stretch his limbs. He uses this power to snatch purses from the elderly. He is a perfect example of the chaos that plagues this world, the strong preying on the weak for meaningless gain. You will find him. You will corner him. And you will claim his power, a test. His first royal duty. Izuku stood up. The worn All Might onesie hanging on his closet door seemed pathetic. He pushed it aside and pulled on a simple, dark green zip-up hoodie and black cargo pants. He slid his feet into his signature red shoes, the last vestige of the boy who had wanted to be a hero. They felt strangely appropriate. Red, the color of blood and revolution. He moved to the window. His second-floor room was not a significant drop, but he had no intention of using the door. He placed a hand on the glass. The shadows in the room deepened, coalescing around his fingers. The glass didn't shatter, it seemed to dissolve into darkness, leaving a perfect, hand-sized hole of nothingness. He widened the hole with a thought, creating an exit. He slipped through the aperture into the cool night air, landing silently on the grass below. The shadow hole sealed behind him, leaving the window pristine, as if he had never been there. He was no longer a prisoner in his room. He was a king entering his domain. The city at night was a different beast. The bright, hopeful mask it wore during the day was gone, replaced by a more honest face of shadow and neon. Izuku walked the streets, a ghost in the urban jungle. He kept his hood up, his face obscured, but it was hardly necessary. People's eyes slid right past him. He was just another teenager out too late. They couldn't sense the immense, coiled power within him. They were cattle, blissfully unaware of the wolf in their midst. He could feel it, though. A new sense he hadn't had before. The sovereign called it dominion. It was an awareness of the power dynamics around him. He could feel the faint, flickering embers of the quirks of sleeping citizens in their apartments. He could feel the stronger, more active thrum from a pro-hero on a distant patrol, and he could feel the spiky, agitated pulse of a quirk being used for a selfish, violent purpose. It was a sour note in the city's symphony, and it drew him like a shark to blood. He found the thief in a narrow, garbage-strewn alleyway connecting a bustling market street to a quiet residential area. The man was a weasel, thin and twitchy, with a greasy ponytail. He was counting a wad of cash under the dim, orange glow of a flickering security light. Beside him, an elderly woman was sobbing, her purse lying open and empty on the ground. The thief, whose name was Kenta Tanaka, was feeling pleased with himself. A quick score. His quirk, Rubberneck, wasn't much. He could stretch his neck and arms up to 15 feet, useless in a real fight, but perfect for snatching things from a distance and disappearing into a crowd. He pocketed the cash and was about to slink away when he heard a sound, a single, soft footstep behind him. He spun around, a sneer on his face. "Get lost, kid. This ain't your business." Standing at the mouth of the alley was a boy in a dark hoodie. His face was hidden in shadow, but he was small, unassuming. Kenta wasn't intimidated. He was used to scaring people off. "You deaf?" I said, "Beat it before you get hurt." Izuku didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply lowered his head slightly, and from the depths of his hood, 2 points of brilliant, emerald light ignited. His eyes. Kenta felt a sudden, inexplicable jolt of fear. It wasn't the normal fear of getting into a fight. This was something else. Something ancient and primal. It was the fear of a rabbit that has just realized the shadow passing over it is not a cloud, but a hawk. Izuku took a step forward. And with that step, he released his aura. The world dropped out from under Kenta Tanaka. The grimy alley, the flickering light, the distant sounds of the city, it all faded into a roaring in his ears. The air became thick, heavy, crushing him from all sides. An invisible weight slammed down on his shoulders, forcing him to his knees with a crack of bone on concrete. His breath hitched in his chest, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Every instinct in his body was screaming one singular command: submit. He tried to fight it. He was a villain, a tough guy. He tried to activate his quirk, to stretch his arm into a makeshift whip. But his body wouldn't obey. His muscles were locked, paralyzed by a wave of pure, unadulterated terror. He could do nothing but stare at the approaching figure, at those two glowing green eyes that promised not pain, but utter and complete annihilation. This wasn't a hero. Heroes postured, they shouted, they engaged. This was an executioner. Izuku stopped in front of the trembling man. He looked down, his expression unreadable in the shadows. He could feel the man's quirk, a frantic, pathetic thing fluttering within him like a moth in a jar. He saw its structure, its limitations, its very essence. It was simple. Crude. Easy. He reached out a hand, his fingers extended. The black markings on his skin seemed to pulse with faint green light. Kenta flinched, a pathetic whimper escaping his lips. He squeezed his eyes shut, expecting a punch, a blast, something he could understand. What he got was worse. Izuku's fingers, cold as the grave, gently touched the man's forehead. Kenta's world exploded in silent, psychic agony. It wasn't pain. It was violation. He felt an alien presence slide into his very being, a metaphysical hook that latched onto something deep inside him, something that had been a part of him since he was 4 years old. It hooked into his quirk, his birthright, his very identity, and then it pulled. He screamed, a raw, ragged sound of pure spiritual anguish. He felt a part of his soul being ripped out of him, a violent, tearing sensation that left a gaping, hollow void behind. The world went gray. The familiar, comforting thrum of his own power inside him was gone. He was empty. He was nothing. Izuku drew his hand back. A writhing ball of black and green energy, shot through with sickly gray light, pulsed in his palm. It was the raw essence of the man's quirk, severed from its host. He closed his fist, and the energy solidified. When he opened his hand again, a creature stood in his palm. It was no bigger than his hand, a small, imp-like being made of solidified shadow. It had long, spindly limbs that could stretch and contort unnaturally, and its eyes were two glowing green dots, identical to Izuku's. It looked up at him with an expression of absolute, unquestioning loyalty. It was a part of him now. His first subject. His first soldier. He glanced down at the man on the ground. Kenta Tanaka was still alive, curled in a fetal position, sobbing uncontrollably. He wasn't crying from pain, but from loss. The loss of a limb would have been less traumatic. Izuku had taken a part of who he was. Izuku turned his attention to the old woman, who was huddled against the wall, staring with wide, terrified eyes. He walked over to the dropped purse, knelt, and retrieved the wad of cash. He walked back, placed the money gently into her trembling hands, and then turned to leave without a word. Who are you? She stammered, looking from the money to the broken man, to the strange shadow imp now perched on Izuku's shoulder. Are you a hero? Izuku paused at the edge of the alley. He considered the question. A hero saves people. He had, in a way, done that. But that wasn't his goal. Saving her was merely a byproduct of punishing him. The means, not the end. No, he said, his voice quiet but carrying an unnatural resonance. It was the first time he had spoken since the rooftop. I'm the new king. He stepped out of the alley and melted into the night, the little shadow imp clinging to his shoulder, its long, rubbery arms wrapped around his neck. The walk home was different. He was not the same person who had left. He had a companion now, a tangible symbol of his power. The imp was a silent, obedient creature. It skittered from his shoulder to his hand, stretching its limbs in curious, exploratory ways. It was his now. That power, once used to harm the weak, would now serve his will for order. A cold, thrilling sense of satisfaction settled over him. This was power. True power. All Might could punch a villain through a building, but the villain would be back. He would still have his quirk, his will. What Izuku had done was far more permanent. He had taken the weapon, dismantled it, and added it to his own arsenal. He hadn't just stopped a crime. He had erased the criminal's ability to commit it. It was efficient. It was absolute. He re-entered his room through the same shadow portal, which sealed silently behind him. The All Might posters seemed even more ridiculous now. Their bright colors were an offense to the dark, serious work he now had to do. He walked to his desk and sat down. His collection of hero analysis notebooks sat in a neat pile. Number 13 was on top, its pages slightly singed from his encounter with the sludge villain. A lifetime of work. A lifetime of wasted effort. He picked up the first notebook. He was 6 years old when he started it. The drawings were crude, crayon-scrawled approximations of heroes, the notes written in a childish, messy hand. He flipped through the pages of his life. Each notebook represented years of dedication, of hope, of a dream that had proven to be a lie. They were relics of a dead boy. They were anchors to a past he no longer needed. With a calm, deliberate motion, he took the notebook and his lighter. He carried them to the metal trash can in the corner of his room. He opened the first page, a drawing of All Might, and set it aflame. The paper curled, turning black at the edges, the hero's smiling face consumed by fire until it was nothing but gray ash. One by one, he burned them all. He watched years of analysis, of strategy, of admiration, turn to smoke and float away. He felt no sadness, no regret. It was a ritual cleansing. A funeral for Izuku Midoriya. When the last page of notebook number 13 had crumbled into ash, he returned to his desk. The surface was now clear. He pulled a new, pristine notebook from his backpack. It was black, with a simple, unadorned cover. He opened it to the first page. The shadow imp hopped from his shoulder onto the desk, its glowing green eyes watching him work. He picked up a pen. The crisp, clean scratching of the nib on paper was the only sound in the room. At the top of the page, in neat, precise lettering, he wrote the title, Kingdom Analysis for the Future No. 1. Below it, he began to write his first entry, his new life's work. Objective: the systematic dismantling of the current hero-centric societal structure, and the establishment of a new world order under a single, absolute authority. Methodology: 1. Power consolidation. Identify and subjugate individuals with useful or dangerous quirks. Assimilate their power to expand the sovereign's influence and military might. Priority targets are those whose powers can control, disable, or provide strategic advantage. 2. Destabilization of public trust. Exploit the inherent flaws of the Hero Public Safety Commission. Highlight hero failures, corruption, and the hypocrisy of a system that values popularity and branding over true safety. Order cannot be built until the illusion of the old order is shattered. 3. Identification of key assets and threats. Threats high priority. All Might, the central pillar of the current system. His ideological and symbolic power must be broken. Direct confrontation is currently inadvisable. His weakening state is a key variable. All for one, unknown entity mentioned in historical texts. A potential rival with similar power acquisition abilities. Must be investigated. His rumored pawn, Tamura Shigaraki, is an agent of chaos and must be either eliminated or subjugated. Assets, potential subjects/allies, hero killer, Stain, ideologically aligned with the belief that the current hero system is corrupt. His fanaticism could be a powerful tool if properly directed. Outcast the disenfranchised, individuals with so-called villainous quirks, the quirkless, and others rejected by society are a potential foundation for the new kingdom. Offer them safety and purpose in exchange for absolute loyalty. He paused, his pen hovering over the paper. He looked at his reflection in the dark screen of his monitor. The glowing green eyes, the cold, determined set of his jaw. Behind him, the All Might poster was a ghost, a faded memory of a forgotten god. At his feet, his first demon, the stolen power of a petty thief, curled up and waited patiently for its king's next command. The boy who wanted to be a hero was dead. 6 months passed. 6 months in which the world Izuku Midoriya had known faded into a distant, irrelevant memory. The seasons turned, but within the burgeoning sovereign, it was a perpetual, twilight autumn, a time of methodical decay and the quiet gathering of strength for a long winter. His base of operations was a testament to this philosophy. He had claimed a forgotten piece of the city's infrastructure, a sprawling, abandoned subway maintenance depot buried deep beneath the Kamino Ward. The entrance was a collapsed, graffiti-scarred stairwell in a derelict industrial park, a place the city had condemned and forgotten. To the world above, it was a ruin. To Izuku, it was the heart of his nascent kingdom, a place he called the Silent Bastion. Down in the echoing dark, he had carved out his domain. The cavernous main chamber, where trains were once repaired, now served as his throne room. A single, makeshift throne sat on a raised platform of concrete, fashioned from a salvaged driver's seat and plates of scrap metal, stark and functional. The only light came from a network of emergency fixtures he had rewired, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like specters on the damp, curved walls. The air was cool and smelled of ozone, concrete, and the strange, metallic tang of his own power. This was where he trained. This was where he planned. Izuku sat on his throne, no longer the boy from the rooftop. The 6 months of absolute focus had honed him. He was still lean, but the adolescent softness was gone, replaced by a wiry strength. He moved with a silent, deliberate economy, every gesture precise and controlled. His black hair, now longer, fell across his forehead, the emerald streaks within it catching the dim light like veins of glowing ore. The crack-like markings on his skin had spread, now visible on his neck and the backs of his hands, a dark filigree that marked him as something other than human. He wore simple, dark attire, black cargo pants, combat boots, and a high-collared dark green tunic that was both practical and subtly regal. Before him, on the vast concrete floor, stood his army. Or rather, the beginnings of it. There were over 3 dozen of them now, the Shadow Imps. Each one was a stolen quirk given form, a dark puppet tethered to his will. They were a motley collection of grotesque and fascinating shapes. The first, the one taken from the purse snatcher, stood at the forefront, its long, rubbery limbs now capable of stretching across the entire chamber. Beside it was a squat, toad-like creature with a prehensile, sticky tongue, a former shoplifter. Another could flatten itself into a 2-dimensional shadow, a corporate spy. A small, bat-winged demon could emit a disorienting sonic screech, a delinquent who used his quirk to shatter windows. They were his extensions, his eyes and ears throughout the city. During the day, they would dissolve into intangible shadows, slipping through keyholes and under doors, observing, listening. At night they returned to him, pouring their gathered intelligence directly into his mind. It was a network far more efficient than any police force or hero agency could manage. He was reviewing their reports now, his eyes closed in concentration. He saw through their senses, a drug deal going down at the docks, a corrupt politician making a deal in a high-rise office, the patrol routes of the local heroes. He catalogued it all, filing it away in the vast, cold library of his mind. He was building a map of the city's soul, charting its every weakness, every pressure point. The consolidation of power is proceeding adequately. The sovereign's voice noted from within, a constant, dispassionate advisor. But these tools are limited. They are puppets. A king needs a court. He needs lieutenants. Subjects with their own will, their own skills, bound to you by loyalty and purpose. Izuku opened his eyes, the emerald glow within them intensifying. I know. I have been searching. His criteria were specific. He was not looking for raw power. He was not looking for thugs or sycophants. He was looking for the broken, the rejected, the ones who, like him, had been chewed up and spat out by the world's hypocritical machinery. He was looking for those who would not just serve his new world order, but who would need it to survive. In their desperation, he would find their devotion, and his shadow network had finally found a perfect candidate. He focused his mind, calling forth the information one of his imps had gathered from a police precinct's data server. The file materialized in his thoughts, crisp and clear. Name, Himiko Toga. Age 17. Quirk, transform. Can take on the complete physical appearance of another person by ingesting their blood. Duration is proportionate to the amount of blood consumed. Status, fugitive. Wanted for a series of grisly assaults, suspected in the disappearance and murder of at least one classmate. Psychological profile indicates a severe hematomania and an obsession with love, blood, and becoming the objects of her affection. The world saw a monster. A deranged killer. A villain to be locked away or put down. Izuku saw something else. He saw a girl whose very nature, the core of her quirk, had been deemed monstrous by society. Her power demanded blood, demanded an intimacy so extreme it was seen as violation. She was told her fundamental desires, the very expression of her being, were evil. So she had embraced it. She was not a bug in the system, she was a feature, a predictable, tragic result of a world that sorts its children into hero and villain based on the lottery of their birth. She is a kindred spirit, Izuku thought, a cold flicker of empathy stirring within him. Rejected by society for what she is, her quirk has immense strategic value for infiltration and assassination. The Sovereign added, its tone practical. Her psychological instability is a liability, but it can be managed. Directed, she craves acceptance. Offer it, and she will be a loyal weapon. I will not offer her acceptance, Izuku corrected, standing from his throne. I will offer her a place where acceptance is irrelevant. In my kingdom, one is not accepted or rejected. One is simply useful, or they are removed. His shadow imp stirred, their glowing green eyes fixed on him as he descended from the platform. He walked through their silent, waiting ranks. Prepare the way, he commanded them, not with words but with a pulse of will. Find her. Isolate her. Do not engage. I will make the approach myself. In an instant, the 36 shadow creatures dissolved into wisps of black smoke, flowing up the walls and out into the city through cracks and ventilation shafts, a silent, unseen tide of darkness on a mission for their king. Himiko Toga was cold and hungry. Her hideout was a squalid, one-room apartment in a condemned building on the edge of the red light district. The wallpaper was peeling in damp, leper sheets, and the air was thick with the stench of decay and iron. The floor was littered with empty blood bags scrounged from a medical waste dumpster, and the drained, pale corpses of rats and stray cats. It was a miserable existence, but it was hers. She sat cross-legged on a filthy mattress, sharpening a cheap utility knife on a whetstone. Her school uniform, which she still wore, was stained and torn. Her blonde hair was messy, tied up in its signature unruly buns. A manic, almost desperate smile was plastered on her face, but her golden eyes, cat-like and sharp, darted nervously toward the boarded-up window every few seconds. She was being hunted. Not just by the police and the heroes anymore. There were whispers in the underworld of a new player, a ghost that took villains off the street, leaving nothing behind but terrified witnesses and a strange, lingering cold. Some said it was a new hero. Some said it was a monster that ate quirks. Toga didn't know what to believe, but the streets felt different lately. The shadows felt watchful. Her hunger was a physical ache in her belly, a frantic thrumming under her skin. It wasn't for food. It was a deeper, more profound craving. The need to see blood. To taste it. To become someone else, just for a little while. To be lovely. She giggled, a high, unhinged sound that was swallowed by the oppressive silence of the room. So cute, she whispered to herself, thinking of a boy she'd seen earlier, his face flushed with life, his blood probably so warm and sweet. She wanted to know what it was like to be him. She wanted to love him so much she could wear his face. That was the problem. The world didn't understand love. They called her a freak. A monster. They'd looked at her, at the bloody bird in her hands all those years ago, with disgust. They didn't see the beauty in it. The love. A floorboard creaked in the hallway outside her door. Toga went rigid. The smile vanished from her face, replaced by the tense, focused look of a cornered predator. She held the knife in a practiced, reverse grip, her body coiling like a spring. She was silent, her breathing shallow, listening. Another creak. Then silence. She held her breath, straining to hear. Nothing. Maybe it was just the building settling. Maybe it was a rat. She was starting to relax when she noticed it. The quality of the shadows in her room was changing. The faint light filtering through the cracks in the boarded-up windows seemed to be dimming. The dark corners of the apartment weren't just dark anymore. They were an absolute, light-devouring black. And they were moving. Slowly, she turned her head. A small, toad-like creature made of pure shadow was sitting on the windowsill, its sticky tongue flicking out to taste the air. Another, a flat, inky stain, was slithering under her door. A bat-winged imp hung upside down from a water pipe on the ceiling. Their eyes, all of them, were glowing with the same, intense emerald light, and they were all fixed on her. Toga didn't scream. Her fear was quickly being overridden by a profound, giddy curiosity. They were so strange. So cute. And they didn't seem hostile. They were just watching. Waiting. The temperature in the room dropped sharply. A faint mist, like cold breath, curled from the deepening shadows near the door. The shadows churned, thickened, and then rose up, coalescing into a human form. The figure that stepped out of the darkness was a boy, not much older than her. He was dressed in dark, functional clothes, and his presence was overwhelming. It was like a physical weight, a pressure that made the air thick and hard to breathe. He was the source of the emerald light she saw in the eyes of the shadow creatures. His own eyes burned with it, cold and ancient and utterly captivating. "Himiko Toga," he said. His voice was calm, level, and held an unnatural resonance that vibrated in her bones. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Toga scrambled back on the mattress, her knife held defensively in front of her. "Who are you? Did you send these little guys? They're so cute." Her tone shifted wildly from threatened to delighted. The boy took another step into the room, his gaze sweeping over the squalor, the dead rats, the blood bags, and finally settling on her. His expression did not change. There was no disgust, no fear, no judgment. There was only a calm, analytical assessment. It was the most unnerving and, strangely, the most comforting thing she had ever experienced. "I did," he answered simply. "They are my servants. My eyes and ears. Are you a hero?" "You don't look like a hero," she chirped, tilting her head. "Are you a villain?" "You don't feel like a villain either. You feel different. Important. The labels of this world no longer apply to me," the boy said, stopping in the center of the room, a safe distance away. "I am here to make you an offer." Toga giggled. "An offer? Are you going to kill me? I'd like to see you try. It could be fun. Maybe I'll get to see your blood. I bet it's pretty." The boy's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. It was a cold, sharp thing, but it held no malice. "I have no intention of killing you. I have no intention of harming you at all. I am here because I understand you." That gave her pause. The knife in her hand lowered slightly. "Understand me? Nobody understands me." "They don't," he agreed, his voice softening just a fraction, becoming a hypnotic, persuasive tool. "They see your quirk, your appetite, and they call you a monster. They cast you out. They hunt you. They try to force you to deny the very essence of your own being. They want you to be something you are not, and they punish you for failing to meet their impossible standard." Every word was a key unlocking a door deep inside her. He was speaking her truth, a truth she had only ever screamed into the uncaring silence. "Your quirk requires blood," he continued, his glowing eyes fixed on hers. "Your heart desires to become the one you love. It is an urge as natural to you as breathing. To society, this is a sickness. A crime. To me, it is a rare and valuable talent." Toga was mesmerized. She crawled to the edge of the mattress, her weariness completely forgotten, replaced by a desperate, hungry fascination. "A talent?" she whispered. "The world is a machine of chaos," he said, his voice taking on a grander, more regal tone. "I am going to fix it. I am building a new world. A kingdom of perfect, absolute order. In this kingdom, there will be no outcasts. There will be no villainous quirks. There will only be purpose. I have a purpose for you, Himiko Toga. A place where your hunger will not be a curse, but a tool. Where your desire to love and to become will not be a crime, but a royal duty." He was offering her everything she had ever wanted, but had never known how to ask for. A world where she didn't have to hide. A world where she could be herself. What would I have to do?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and excitement. "You would serve me," he stated, the words simple and absolute. "You would hunt my enemies. You would wear their faces, walk in their halls, and learn their secrets. You would bleed them for the sake of our new order. I will give you targets. I will give you sanction. Your appetites will be sated, your talents will be celebrated, and in return, you will give me your unwavering loyalty." It was too good to be true. A trick. Why? Why me? "Because," Izuku said, and for the first time, a flicker of something deeply personal entered his voice, a cold echo of the boy on the rooftop. "Like you, I was cast out. Judged worthless. And like you, I have found a power that this world is not prepared for. I am gathering the broken stones that this society has thrown away, and I will use them to build the foundations of my throne. He was beautiful. His words, his eyes, his power, it was all so lovely. He wasn't afraid of her. He didn't see a monster. He saw a stone for his throne. It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her, but there was still a sliver of doubt. A lifetime of being a cornered animal had taught her caution. This kingdom of yours, does it even exist? Or is it just a pretty dream in your head? Izuku's cold smile returned. You wish for proof of my power? A glimpse of the world I am building? He raised his hand. Very well. Observe. The shadows in the room came alive. They poured from every corner, flowing across the floor like black water, converging in the space behind him. Toga watched, breathless, as the darkness writhed and rose, solidifying not into the small, imp-like creatures from before, but into something far more impressive. 24 humanoid figures, each 8 feet tall, took shape from the shadows. They were clad in what looked like ancient, segmented armor made of polished obsidian. They held long, shadowy pikes in their hands, and their faces were blank, featureless voids, save for 2 glowing emerald points of light that mirrored their masters. They moved with perfect, silent unison, forming 2 immaculate ranks behind Izuku. They radiated an aura of cold, implacable obedience. It wasn't just a display of power. It was a display of order. Perfect, beautiful, silent order born from the darkness itself. This is but a fraction of my power, Izuku said, his voice ringing with authority in the now crowded room. This is the power of a king. I offer you a place in my court. A position of honor, a name to wear with pride. He extended his hand to her, not to touch, but as a gesture of invitation. Join me, Himiko Toga. And you will no longer be a hunted runaway. You will be my royal huntsman. Toga stared, her mind reeling. The dark soldiers, the promise of a purpose, the boy king who saw her not as a monster but as a treasure. Her heart hammered in her chest, a frantic, joyous rhythm. This was love. This had to be love. It was dark, and sharp, and it promised blood and belonging in equal measure. Her smile returned, wider and more genuine than it had been in years. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated adoration. She didn't just walk over to him. She practically skipped, her tattered uniform swirling around her. She came to a stop before him, looking up into his glowing green eyes, her own golden eyes shining with unshed tears of joy. She dropped her knife. It clattered uselessly to the floor. She had no need for it anymore. Her king would give her better ones. She dropped to one knee, a gesture she'd only ever seen in old movies, and bowed her head. It felt right. It felt natural. I accept, my king, she breathed, her voice filled with a devotee's reverence. I am yours. My knife, my face, my blood, it all belongs to you. Just tell me who to love. Tell me who to become. Izuku looked down at the kneeling girl, the first human to willingly bend the knee to him. He felt no pride, no elation. Only the cool satisfaction of a complex calculation proving correct. He had his first follower. His first piece for the board. He placed a hand gently on her head. His touch was cold, but to Toga, it was a benediction. A coronation. Rise, Himiko, he commanded. Rise as the royal huntsman of my court. She looked up at him, her smile a brilliant, bloody promise. I love the sound of that. Good, Izuku said, turning away. The shadow soldiers behind him dissolved back into formless darkness, flowing back into the corners of the room as if they had never been. Then let us leave this place. Your new life begins now. We have much work to do. He began to walk toward the door, not even looking back, completely confident that she would follow. She did. Himiko Toga, the girl who had only ever known hunger and loneliness, practically danced after her new king, her heart full for the first time in her life. She was no longer just a monster. She was the monster of a king. They stepped out of the squalid room and into the darkened hallway. Izuku led the way, a figure of absolute purpose. Toga followed a step behind, a giggling, deadly shadow. The boy who was cast aside and the girl who was called a freak walked together into the night, two broken stones ready to become the foundation of a terrible and glorious new world. The court of the sovereign had its first member. The game had truly begun. In the cold, echoing expanse of the silent bastion, a new kind of map was taking shape. It was not a map of streets and landmarks, but of power. Projected from a salvage terminal onto a vast, smooth concrete wall, it showed the city of Muzutafu as a web of influence. Lines of authority connected hero agencies to police precincts, red zones of villain activity pulsed in the slums, and threads of dark money flowed from corporations to corrupt politicians. It was the city's nervous system, laid bare for its future king to study. Izuku stood before it, his arms crossed, his glowing green eyes tracing a particularly intricate connection. This one originated from a dingy bar in Kamino Ward and spiderwebbed out to low-level villain networks across the city. It was erratic, chaotic, and pulsed with a needy, destructive energy, the signature of Tamura Shigaraki. Behind him, perched atop a stack of rusted metal crates, Himiko Toga was meticulously cleaning a new set of knives. They were a gift from her king, perfectly balanced, surgical-grade steel that hummed with a deadly sharpness. She was humming too, a cheerful, tuneless melody that was a stark contrast to the tomb-like silence of the depot. "He's getting sloppy, my king," she chirped without looking up from her work. "My little shadow friends see his new recruits everywhere. They're loud. They brag. They're making a big mess." "It is not sloppiness," Izuku corrected, his voice a low monotone that still managed to fill the chamber. "It is impatience. Shigaraki is a child playing a game he believes he is the center of. He gathers pawns not for strategy, but to feel the weight of a crown he has not earned." For the past several weeks, Izuku's shadow network had been focused on this new player. They had infiltrated the bar, listened from the rafters, and brought him every scrap of Shigaraki's plan. They knew about his mysterious master, all for one. They knew about his handler, the Warp Gate villain Kurojiri. And they knew about his grand, petulant scheme, a direct assault on Yue High School, targeting the symbol of peace himself. One of Izuku's shadow imps, a flat, inky creature, detached itself from the ceiling and flowed down the wall, merging with his shadow at his feet. Its intelligence flowed into him, a final confirmation. The time, the place, the weapon. It was all set. "This is a prime opportunity." The sovereign's voice resonated in his mind, cold and sharp as glacial ice. "The League of Villains represents the very chaos we seek to eradicate. Anarchy for anarchy's sake. By dismantling their debut, you send a message to both the underworld and the so-called forces of justice. You establish yourself as a third, and superior, power. They are a blunt instrument," Izuku thought in agreement. "Designed to smash. I will show the world the difference between a hammer and a scalpel." He turned, his imposing black coat swirling around his ankles. It was his version of a costume, a heavy, high-collared greatcoat that fell to his boots, its dark fabric seeming to drink the light. It was unadorned, save for a single, subtle clasp at his throat shaped like a shattered crown. Toga looked up, her golden eyes bright with anticipation. "Are we going to play?" "We are going to make a statement," Izuku replied. He walked towards her, his presence causing the very air to feel heavy. "Shigaraki believes this attack will be his coronation as the new Prince of Villains. We will attend his party. And we will demonstrate what a true monarch can do." A wide, feral grin spread across Toga's face. She jumped down from the crates, her new knives disappearing into hidden sheaths with practiced speed. "Oh, this will be so much fun. I hope I get to see lots of blood. The Yui uniforms are so cute. I'd love to try one on." "You will be a spectator today, huntsman," Izuku commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Your role is to bear witness and to stand as my herald. The main performance is mine alone." Toga pouted for a second, then her expression shifted back to one of pure adoration. "Of course, my king! I'll be the best witness ever. I'll watch you make all the heroes and villains cry. It'll be so lovely." Izuku gave a curt nod. He turned back towards the center of the vast chamber. The stage is set. The actors are in place. It is time for the king to make his entrance. He raised a hand, and the shadows in the depot churned. They rose from the floor, not as imps or soldiers, but as a swirling vortex of pure, silent blackness. It was a wound in reality, a gate that did not lead to another place, but to the very concept of nothingness, a shortcut through the fabric of the world. It was his path. He and Toga stepped into the cold, silent abyss. The unforeseen simulation joint, or USJ, was a marvel of hero training technology. A vast, domed structure containing perfect replicas of various disaster zones, a shipwreck, a landslide, a conflagration, a downtown cityscape. For the students of Class 1A, it was a playground of possibilities, a thrilling step forward on their journey to becoming pro-heroes. The air buzzed with their excited chatter. 13, the space hero, was giving their introductory speech, their soft voice full of passion for rescue work. Pro-hero Eraserhead, their homeroom teacher Shota Aizawa, stood off to the side, his typical bored expression masking a sharp, ever-watchful gaze. As I was saying, 13 continued, my quirk, Black Hole, can be a deadly weapon. In this class, you will learn how to use your fantastic gifts to save people, not to fight villains. As if on cue, the lights in the massive facility flickered and died. The central fountain sputtered and went still. A cold, unnatural chill swept through the dome. Aizawa's head snapped up. His posture went from lax to dangerously alert in a fraction of a second. 13. Protect the students. In the center of the plaza below them, the air began to shimmer and distort. A pinprick of black expanded into a swirling, purple-black vortex. It was Kurojire's warp gate. A pale, slender hand emerged first, followed by a man covered in them, Tamura Shigaraki. Behind him, the gate disgorged a flood of villains, a tide of malcontents and thugs, their faces twisted in ugly sneers and greedy grins. 13. What's going on? Eijiro Kurishima asked, his voice tight with a mixture of fear and excitement. Is this part of the training? Stay back. Aizawa barked, pulling his signature goggles over his eyes. His capture weapon, the long, gray scarf around his neck, began to float ominously. This is real. They're villains, the students gasped, the playful atmosphere shattering into a million pieces of cold, hard reality. Shigaraki scratched his neck, his red eyes scanning the facility. Where is he? I went through all the trouble of bringing so many friends to say hello, and All Might isn't even here. Maybe if we kill a few of his students, he'll be tempted to show up. His casual, scratchy voice was more terrifying than any shout. Before he could give an order, Aizawa was already in motion. He launched himself from the top of the stairs, a black-clad wraith descending upon the villains below. He was a whirlwind of controlled violence. His eyes glowed red, erasing the quirks of 3 villains before his feet even touched the ground. His capture weapon shot out like living tendrils, ensnaring a villain with a gigantification quirk, slamming him into another with a blade quirk, and pulling a third off balance. He was one man against dozens, but he was a master of his craft, a perfect engine of anti-quirk combat. Wow! Mr. Aizawa is amazing! A young, green-haired boy with a familiar face murmured in awe. Bakugo scoffed, sparks already popping in his palms. He's a pro. This is what they do. Let's go take care of the trash. But before any of the students could act, Kurojire manifested his misty form before them. I am sorry, but your lesson is cancelled. We will be scattering you and tearing you to pieces. With a surge of dark energy, he enveloped the students in his warp gate, teleporting them to the various zones of the USJ. Down in the plaza, Aizawa was holding his own, but the sheer numbers were beginning to tell. And then he saw it. The thing that had been standing silently beside Shigaraki. A hulking mountain of muscle with dark purple skin, an exposed brain, and dead, beak-like eyes. The Nomu. Nomu, Shigaraki said, his voice bored. Take care of the cool final boss. The creature moved. It wasn't just fast. It was unnaturally, impossibly fast. It vanished from its spot and reappeared directly in front of Aizawa. The hero's eyes widened, his quirk activating, but it had no effect. The Nomu was a biological cheat code. A fist like a wrecking ball slammed into Aizawa's side. The sickening crunch of ribs breaking echoed in the plaza. The pro-hero was thrown through the air, his goggles shattering as he hit the ground. He tried to get up, to erase the quirk of the beast, but it was on him again, grabbing his arm. Another sharp crack. He screamed, a sound of pure agony. The gnome raised his head and slammed it repeatedly into the concrete, the rhythmic, brutal thuds painting the ground red. Shigaraki giggled, a dry, rasping sound. So cool. He's got shock absorption and super regeneration. He's a bioengineered anti-symbol of peace. You can't beat him, Eraserhead. It's game over. Across the facility, the scattered students were fighting their own desperate battles. It was a scene of pure chaos. Villains cackling, explosions ringing out, the screams of students pushed to their absolute limit. This was the debut of the League of Villains. A bloody, chaotic, and successful declaration of war. And then, everything changed. The main lights were still out, but the emergency fixtures that remained suddenly flickered violently. The temperature in the entire dome plummeted, a sudden, unnatural cold that had nothing to do with the weather. A collective shiver ran through heroes, villains, and students alike. The frantic sounds of battle began to die down as everyone, on some primal level, sensed a new and terrible presence. In the center of the plaza, not far from where Shigaraki stood gloating over the broken form of Aizawa, the very air seemed to tear open. It wasn't a swirling, controlled portal like Kuroji's. This was a jagged, silent rift of absolute blackness, a patch of reality that had been erased. It radiated a cold that felt like the void of deep space. Shigaraki stopped scratching. Kuroji? Is that you? Did you bring more players? No, Tamura Shigaraki, Kuroji's misty form replied, his yellow eyes wide with alarm. That is not me. From the wound in reality, a single figure stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a sweeping black greatcoat, his face shadowed by a high collar. He moved with an unnerving, regal calm, his combat boots making no sound on the concrete. Behind him, a girl in a stained school uniform skipped out, a brilliant, bloodthirsty grin on her face, and then the army followed. From the rift, and from every deep shadow in the USJ, they began to form. Dozens upon dozens of tall, silent figures clad in obsidian black armor, holding shadowy pikes. They moved with silent, perfect synchronicity, forming immaculate ranks behind their leader. Their featureless faces, each bearing two glowing emerald eyes, turned as one to survey the battlefield. The remaining villains, the low-level thugs Shigaraki had brought, froze in their tracks. Their instincts, honed by a life of violence, were screaming at them. They had come here to fight heroes. This was something else. This was a graveyard that had come to life. Izuku Midoriya, the sovereign, surveyed the scene. His emerald eyes, burning with a cold, internal fire, swept over the chaos. He saw the scattered students, the terrified 13, the broken Aizawa. He saw the cackling, disorganized mob of villains. And he saw Shigaraki, the petulant child king of this pathetic circus. He felt a profound, intellectual disdain. This was not a strategy. This was a tantrum given form. Who the hell are you? Shigaraki screeched, his arrogance warring with a new, creeping sense of dread. Are you a new hero? A secret boss? This isn't in the game guide. Izuku ignored him completely. To acknowledge him would be to grant him a status he did not deserve. In his new world, Shigaraki and his mob were not even worthy of being called his opposition. They were simply a mess that needed to be cleaned up. His gaze fell upon the students. He saw familiar faces. Uraraka, pinned down in the landslide zone. Ida, trying to organize an escape. And he saw Bakugo, blasting his way through villains in the ruin zone, his face a mask of furious joy. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met across the distance. Bakugo's explosions faltered. His face went pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and a terror he hadn't felt since the day the sludge villain had been turned to dust before his very eyes. Deku? The name was a choked whisper on his lips. Izuku's gaze lingered on him for only a moment before dismissing him. Bakugo, like the rest of them, was irrelevant. A child. A piece in a game he was no longer playing. His attention settled on the true source of power on the field. The Nomu. It had stopped its assault on Aizawa and had turned its dead, beaked eyes toward the newcomers, awaiting its master's command. TCH, fine. Don't answer, Shigaraki snarled, his fear losing out to his rage. You're just another annoying NPC. Noma. Kill him. Kill all of them. Tear them apart. The Noma responded instantly. It launched itself across the plaza, a blur of purple muscle and raw power. The ground cracked under the force of its takeoff. It was an unstoppable biological missile aimed directly at Izuku's heart. Toga giggled with delight, ready for the show. The students who could see, Kirishima and Bakugo from the ruins, Tsu and Mineta from the water, cried out in alarm. Izuku did not move. He did not flinch. He simply raised a single, slender hand, his palm open towards the charging monstrosity. The Noma was 10 feet away when it happened. It was as if it had run into an invisible, immovable wall. Its forward momentum ceased instantly, with a gut-wrenching sound like a train car crumpling. It was frozen in place, its massive fist just inches from Izuku's face, its body straining against an unseen force, muscles bulging and tearing under the impossible strain. A collective gasp went through the USJ. It was silent. Utterly silent. Izuku looked into the Noma's dead eyes, and his own began to glow with a ferocious intensity. He was not just looking at it. He was reading it. His supercharged analytical ability, his Demon King's dominion, tore through the creature's biology, its genetics, its very soul. He saw it all in an instant, the dozens of stolen and spliced quirks, forced together in a chaotic, unstable matrix. Shock absorption. Hyperregeneration. Super strength. Speed. A dozen lesser quirks for stability. It was a masterpiece of biological engineering, and a pathetic piece of art. A puppet of stolen power. The Sovereign's voice echoed in the Noma's dim, command-driven consciousness, a terrifying intrusion of pure intellect into its brutish mind. Stitched together without finesse, without will. A cage of screaming powers, shackled to a dead mind. It is strong. But it is flawed. Shigaraki's jaw was slack. What did you do? Why isn't it moving? Izuku lowered his hand, his gaze still locked on the creature. A collection of parts is not a true being, he said, his voice calm and clear, carrying across the silent plaza to every corner of the facility. It has no will of its own. No core. And anything without a core can be unmade. He flexed the fingers of his right hand. The Noma shuddered. A low, keening groan escaped its beak, a sound of profound, biological wrongness. Its purple skin began to ripple, not with muscle, but as if the flesh itself was losing its integrity. The shock absorption quirk failed first, a psychic severing of the energy that powered it. Then the regeneration, the rapid healing factor sputtered and died, like a doused flame. The creature began to fall apart. Its muscles, no longer sustained by the stolen powers that gave them their impossible density, turned to a semi-liquid pulp. Its bones, designed to withstand titanic forces, cracked and snapped under its own grotesque weight. A symphony of breakage, popping tendons, snapping cartilage, fracturing bone, filled the horrified silence. The Noma didn't even have the coherence to scream. It simply deflated, collapsing in on itself. Its arms sloughed off. Its legs buckled. The exposed brain on its head turned a sickly gray and liquefied. In the space of 5 seconds, the monster that had defeated a pro-hero, the League of Villains' ultimate weapon, was reduced to a steaming, twitching heap of inert flesh, bone, and foul-smelling fluids on the ground. A failed experiment, discarded. The silence that followed was a physical object. It pressed down on everyone, suffocating them. The low-level villains were trembling, some dropping their weapons. The students were frozen, their minds unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Aizawa, bleeding on the ground, stared with one good eye, his stoic demeanor completely shattered. Shigaraki took a step back. Then another. The gamer's facade was gone. This was not a glitch. This was not an NPC. This was a hack, a cheat code, something that had broken the rules of his world. His breathing was ragged, his hands scratching frantically at his neck, drawing blood. "You, what are you?" he stammered, his voice a reedy, terrified whisper. Izuku finally turned his gaze upon him, and the full weight of his aura, the sheer, crushing pressure of his dominion, fell upon the young villain. It was a force of pure, hierarchical authority, the presence of a predator that has just unmade the strongest beast in the jungle with a lazy flick of its wrist. Shigaraki felt an impulse he had not felt since he was a small, terrified child, the urge to kneel. Tamura Shigaraki, Izuku said, and the use of his name made the villain flinch. You ask what I am? He took a step forward, his black coat swirling around him like a cloak of night. His shadow soldiers took one unified step forward with him, the sound of their phantom feet on the concrete like a single, final drumbeat. You are an agent of chaos. You seek to destroy. You smash and burn and kill, believing that by tearing down the old world, a new one will simply rise from the ashes. You are an anarchist, a child breaking his toys in a fit of pique. He gestured to the pile of gore that was once the Nomu, and then to his silent, perfectly ordered army. I am an agent of order. I do not seek to destroy. I seek to rule. There is a difference. A world burned to the ground is not a foundation. It is a grave. I will dismantle the old world brick by brick, and with those same bricks, I will build a new one. A world of perfect structure. Perfect control. Perfect peace. He was standing before Shigaraki now, who was trembling, paralyzed by the force of his presence. Izuku looked down at him with an expression of profound, soul-crushing disappointment. This world needs a true leader, he declared, his voice ringing with the force of a royal decree. Not a petulant child throwing a tantrum. That was the final blow. It didn't just insult Shigaraki, it invalidated his entire existence. Izuku turned his back on him, a gesture of ultimate dismissal. He walked back towards the still open rift of blackness. Our work here is done, huntsman, he said to Toga, who was practically vibrating with ecstatic glee. Ah, already? She whined, though her eyes were shining. But it was just getting good. Your speech was so cool, my king. So cool. Shigaraki, spurred into a final, desperate act of defiance by the insult, lunged forward. Don't you turn your back on me. I'll kill you. I'll disintegrate you. He never made it. Two of Izuku's shadow soldiers moved with impossible speed, intercepting him. They didn't strike him. They simply slammed the butt of their pikes into the ground before him. The impact sent a wave of pure, dark energy through the floor, throwing Shigaraki back as if he'd been hit by a truck. He landed in a heap, stunned and gasping. Izuku didn't even look back. He and Toga stepped into the black rift. His shadow army stood for a moment longer, a silent, terrifying tableau, before dissolving into nothing, their forms receding back into the shadows from whence they came. The rift sealed itself, leaving not even a whisper of its existence. They were gone. The silence they left behind was filled, a moment later, by a thunderous boom as the doors to the USJ were blown open. Have no fear, All Might's voice roared. For I am here. He stood at the entrance, his smile wide, his fists clenched. But the smile immediately vanished. He saw no grand battle. He saw his students, scattered and terrified. He saw his colleagues, 13 and Aizawa, grievously wounded. He saw a league of villains, not fighting, but trembling, defeated not by heroes, but by fear. And in the center of it all, he saw a grotesque pile of flesh that seemed to defy biology. He was too late. Not to stop the villains. He was too late to witness the debut of the monster he had created on that rooftop. A monster who had just announced his existence to the world, not as a hero or a villain, but as a king. The city of Hosu was bleeding. Plumes of black smoke smeared the night sky, sirens wailed in a discordant symphony, and the distant, monstrous roars of Noma echoed between the skyscrapers. It was a city under siege, a canvas of chaos painted by the clumsy, vengeful hand of Tamura Shigaraki. This was his answer to the humiliation he'd suffered at the USJ, not a strategic strike, but a citywide tantrum, unleashing his master's bioengineered monsters to sow terror indiscriminately. Perched atop the gargoyle of a Gothic-style office building, Izuku Midoriya, the sovereign, observed the chaos with a detached, clinical eye. The wind whipped at his black greatcoat, but he stood as still as the stone beneath his feet, a silent, judging god surveying a flawed creation. Beside him, Himiko Toga sat swinging her legs over the dizzying drop, humming a cheerful tune as she watched the fires spread. Shigaraki's new pets are ugly, she commented, pointing with the tip of her knife at a winged Nomu that had just crashed through the window of a nearby building. But they're making such a pretty mess. So much screaming. So much blood. It is the screaming of a child who has lost the game, Izuku said, his voice a low rumble. This is not an attack. It is a cry for attention. He seeks to prove that his chaos is more potent than my order. He is mistaken. His emerald eyes, glowing with a faint internal light, were not focused on the rampaging Nomu. They were scanning the narrower, darker arteries of the city below. His network of shadow imps had been working tirelessly, flitting through the alleyways, and their collective intelligence was painting a different, more interesting picture than the brute force of the monsters. The hero killer is here! The sovereign's voice noted from within his mind. He is drawn to the chaos, but not as a participant. He sees it as an opportunity. A hunting ground. He is a scalpel in a city being bludgeoned by a hammer, Izuku thought. His ideology is crude, his methods inefficient. But the core principle, the diagnosis is correct. The world knew Kaizo Makaguro, the hero killer, Stain, as a fanatical murderer, a villain who targeted pro-heroes he deemed unworthy. He had crippled dozens, killed many more, and left a trail of blood and terror in his wake. The public saw him as a monster, another symptom of the world's growing sickness. Izuku saw him as a potential asset. A zealot whose faith could be redirected. Stain believed the hero system was fundamentally corrupt, a fame-seeking, money-grubbing perversion of what a true hero should be. He believed only All Might was a true hero, and sought to purge all the fakes who dared to sully the title. Izuku agreed with the premise, but found the conclusion laughably sentimental. All Might was not the exception to the corrupt system. He was its gilded figurehead, the beautiful lie that allowed the entire rotten structure to persist. Stain was trying to prune the dead branches of a poisoned tree, not realizing the roots themselves were toxic. Huntsman, Izuku said, his gaze finally locking onto a specific alleyway 4 blocks away. He could feel it now, the sharp, focused intent of the hunter, the panicked fear of the prey. Our target is in play. The performance is about to begin. Ooh, are we going to meet the famous hero killer? Toga asked, her eyes lighting up. He loves blood too. I've seen his pictures. He's so intense. Do you think he'd let me have a little taste? You will observe only, Izuku commanded, his tone absolute. He is not a common thug to be subjugated. He is a man of conviction. To win him, one does not use force. One uses philosophy. Without another word, Izuku stepped off the edge of the building. He didn't fall. He descended, cloaked in a shroud of shadow that negated his momentum, landing as silently as a falling leaf in the darkness of an adjacent alley. Toga giggled and followed, leaping down with a reckless, acrobatic grace, landing in a crouch beside him. This way, Izuku ordered, and they moved through the labyrinth of Hosa's backstreets, 2 shadows slipping through a burning city. Their destination an obscure alley where a drama of blood and conviction was reaching its climax. The alley stank of iron and desperation. The pro-hero native was pinned to the wall, a long, serrated blade driven through his shoulder, his own blood a paralyzing agent against him. Standing over him was the hero killer, Stain. He was a terrifying figure, a man seemingly stitched together from blades and ideological fury. His tattered red scarf whipped around him like a bloody flag, and his mask, a grotesque parody of a face, could not hide the manic, righteous fire in his eyes. You are a fake, Stain hissed, his voice raspy and filled with contempt. You care only for the paycheck. You do not deserve the name hero. He raised his katana, its edge gleaming in the firelight from the street, ready to deliver the final, culling blow. Stop! The shout was young, filled with a mixture of terror and righteous fury. Tenya Ida, clad in the gleaming silver armor of his family's hero legacy, stood at the mouth of the alley. His face was a mask of cold, vengeful rage. Villain! I am the brother of the hero you attacked. You will pay for what you did to Ingenium. My name is Tenya Ida, and I am the hero who will defeat you. Stain slowly turned, his gaze dismissing the wounded native and focusing on the young hero. He saw the expensive armor, the proud lineage, the rage. He saw everything he hated. Another fake, Stain rasped, a cruel grin spreading across his lips. You reek of vengeance. A hero does not act for selfish reasons. You are the sickness I am sworn to cure, and for daring to use the word hero to describe your petty revenge, you will die first. The fight was brutal and short. Ida's speed was impressive, but Stain was a master of his environment, a predator in his element. He used the narrow confines of the alley, the ricochet of his blades, and his own terrifying, unpredictable movements to overwhelm the young hero. Ida was driven by rage, but Stain was driven by a fanatical creed. Creed always triumphed over emotion. With a flick of his wrist, Stain threw a knife that grazed Ida's arm. Before Ida could react, the villain was on him, a blur of motion, his long tongue darting out to lick the blood from the blade. Ida's body locked up. He fell to the ground, paralyzed, his armor clattering uselessly on the pavement. The world went silent and sluggish. He could do nothing but watch as Stain stood over him, the tip of his katana aimed at Ida's face. So disappointing, Stain lamented. The legacy of ingenium ends here, not with a bang, but with a whimper. A sudden, intense blast of fire filled the alley, forcing Stain to leap back. A wall of ice immediately followed, separating him from the fallen heroes. Shoto Todoroki stood at the entrance to the alley, his left side wreathed in flame, his right smoking with frost. Ida, did you get the message? You need to give more details in a time like this. It took me a while to find you. He was another variable, another piece on the board. The son of endeavor. Stain's eyes narrowed. Another one. Does the sickness have no end? The two began to fight, a clash of elemental power against bladed fury. Todoroki was powerful, his control over both ice and fire making him a formidable opponent, but Stain was relentless. He was not just a fighter, he was a force of nature, an embodiment of his own brutal philosophy. High above, hidden on a fire escape that overlooked the alley, Izuku watched the scene unfold with the detached interest of a theater critic. Toga was beside him, practically vibrating with excitement. "Ooh, that one's pretty," she whispered, her eyes fixed on Todoroki. "Fire and ice. His blood must be all tingly. Can I have him, my king? Please?" "Patience, huntsman," Izuku murmured, his gaze fixed on the philosophical core of the battle. He was watching Stain, analyzing his movements, his words, his conviction. The final actor has yet to arrive. As if on cue, a green blur shot down the alley. It was the Midoriya that the world knew, the one from the sports festival, with a quirk that shattered his own body. He had arrived. The original Izuku Midoriya, the boy who would have been in this alley, fighting for his friends, a vessel for one for all, was a ghost, a phantom of a different timeline. The being watching from above had no connection to that boy's sentimental heroism. He saw the scene not as a desperate rescue, but as a convergence of useful, flawed ideologies. Ida's rigid adherence to rules, Todoroki's struggle with his lineage and power, Midoriya's reckless, self-destructive altruism. They were all cogs in the hero machine he intended to break. The battle below raged. The three boys, through a combination of teamwork and desperation, managed to push Stain back. They wounded him. They fought not for fame or money, but to save each other. In another story, this would have been their triumph, a testament to their budding heroism. In this story, it was merely the prelude. They finally managed to subdue the hero killer, tying him up as sirens grew louder in the distance. The boys were exhausted, bleeding, but victorious. They had faced a monster and won. "It's over," Ida said, his voice heavy with relief and the lingering shame of his vengeful motives. That was Izuku's cue. He didn't make a grand entrance. There was no gate of shadows, no army of soldiers. He and Toga simply dropped from the fire escape, landing in the mouth of the alley with a silence that was more profound than any sound. The three battered students and the captured Stain all froze. The sudden appearance of two new figures, one radiating an aura of absolute, crushing authority, changed the entire atmosphere of the alley. The relief of their victory evaporated, replaced by a cold, prickling dread. Bakugo had described the boy from the USJ. So had Kirishima. A figure in a black coat with glowing green eyes, who had unmade a monster with a gesture. Seeing him in person was infinitely more terrifying. His presence was a physical weight, a pressure that made the very air seem to crackle. "Midoriya?" Todoroki breathed, his eyes wide. He recognized the face, the hair, but the being wearing them was a stranger, a creature from a nightmare. The boy he had declared his rival at the sports festival was a beacon of heroic, if reckless, light. This figure was a void that consumed light. "Deku?" Ida stammered, his mind struggling to reconcile the timid, quirkless boy from his past with the terrifying monarch standing before him. The original Midoriya, standing beside his friends, felt a strange, soul-deep resonance. It was like looking at a distorted reflection of himself in a dark mirror. He could feel the raw, immense power rolling off the figure in waves. It was not one for all. It was something older, colder, and hungrier. Izuku ignored the students. Their shock and fear were irrelevant data points. His attention was fixed entirely on the man tied up on the ground. He walked forward, his footsteps echoing in the sudden, tense silence. Toga skipped along beside him, her grin wide and predatory as she eyed the bloodied students. "Kaizome Akaguro," Izuku said, his voice calm and resonant. "The hero killer, Stain. I have been watching your work with great interest." Stain, even bound and defeated, radiated defiance. He glared up at Izuku, his eyes burning with undiminished fire. "I do not know you. But you stand with these fakes. That makes you my enemy, do I?" Izuku stopped a few feet from him, tilting his head in a gesture of academic curiosity. "Tell me, Kaizome, what is your goal? To kill every hero you deem unworthy? You could kill a dozen a night for the next 10 years and not even scratch the surface. You are a man trying to empty the ocean with a bucket. I will cleanse this society." Stain snarled. "I will remind the world of what a true hero is. The word hero has been corrupted, cheapened. I will restore its meaning with blood and fire." "A noble sentiment," Izuku said, his voice dangerously smooth. "But your premise is flawed. You believe the idea of a hero has been corrupted. I am here to tell you that the idea itself is the corruption." He began to pace slowly in front of the captured villain, his voice taking on a professorial, lecturing tone. The students watched, paralyzed, caught in the gravity of this strange, terrifying philosophical debate. "You hold up All Might as your paragon of virtue," Izuku continued. "You believe he is the one true hero in a world of fakes. You are a devout worshipper at the altar of a false god. All Might is not the solution, he is the ultimate symptom of the disease." Stain's eyes widened in sacrilegious fury. "Blasphemy! All Might is the only one who what?" Izuku cut him off, his voice sharpening like a blade. "The only one who smiles while the system rots from within? He is a pillar, yes. But he is holding up a condemned building. His existence creates a dangerous illusion of safety. People look to him, to all heroes, to solve their problems. They abdicate their own strength, their own responsibility. The hero system doesn't create strong citizens. It creates a population of dependent, helpless sheep, waiting for a shepherd to save them from wolves." He stopped and looked down at Stain, his glowing eyes seeming to pierce the man's very soul. "You and I agree on the diagnosis, hero killer. This society is sick. It is broken. It is a chaotic mess where the strong and the famous thrive, while the weak and the forgotten are trampled underfoot. But your prescription is wrong. Culling the fakes is not enough. You cannot fix a machine by simply polishing a few of its gears. The entire machine must be dismantled. It must be torn down and replaced with something better. Something that works." A profound silence filled the alley. The original Midoriya, Ida, and Todoroki were staring, their minds reeling. This dark version of their classmate was not just a villain. He was a revolutionary, speaking a twisted, terrifying logic that was both insane and chillingly coherent. Stain was speechless. For years, his creed had been his armor, his weapon, his entire world. No one had ever challenged it. They had called him evil, insane, a monster, but no one had ever engaged with the core of his philosophy and found it insufficient. What would you replace it with?" Stain finally managed to ask, his voice a hoarse whisper. Izuku's lips curved into that cold, sharp smile. "With order. True order. A system not based on the whims of individual heroes, or the popularity polls, or the corruptible laws of governments. A system based on a single, absolute will. A kingdom where every single person has a purpose, a designated role, and is protected not by a fallible symbol, but by an unassailable structure of power." He gestured around the alley, at the wounded heroes, the defeated villain, the distant fires. "Look at this chaos. This is the world that heroes have built. A world of constant, unending conflict. In my world, there will be no conflict. There will be no crime. There will be no villains. Because the concepts of good and evil will be rendered obsolete. There will only be my law, my order, and my peace. He knelt down, bringing his face level with Stain's. The sheer force of his presence was overwhelming. You are a scalpel, Kaizo Makaguro, trying to perform surgery on a corpse. Your conviction is wasted on this pointless crusade. I am not trying to fix the body. I am building a new one entirely. He reached out, and a small, serpentine shadow imp materialized from his sleeve. It slithered over and, with its sharp, shadow claws, neatly sliced the ropes binding Stain. The hero killer was free. The students gasped, readying themselves for another fight. But Stain did not move. He simply stared at Izuku, his mind a whirlwind of shattered convictions and terrifying new possibilities. I am offering you a new purpose, Izuku said, standing up. Your blades, your skills, your indomitable will, they are wasted killing street-level fakes. Join me. In my kingdom, you will not have to hunt false heroes. You will be the judge, the arbiter of loyalty. You will stand at my side and help me purge the very concept of chaos from this world. You will be my inquisitor. It was a temptation beyond anything Stain had ever imagined. Not just a license to continue his crusade, but an invitation to be a founding father of a new world order built on the very principles of conviction he held so dear. This boy, this king, was not a fake. He was not a hero. He was not a villain. He was a figure of absolute, terrifying conviction, the very thing Stain had been searching for his entire life, even in All Might. He looked from Izuku to the battered students. He saw their fear, their confusion, their naive belief in the broken system. And he saw his choice. He could die here, a footnote in the annals of villainy, or he could become a god in a new age. Suddenly, a winged Nomu, drawn by the commotion, swooped down into the alley, its claws extended, aiming for the original Midoriya. Stain moved. He was a blur, faster than he had been in the entire fight. He intercepted the Nomu, his broken ribs screaming in protest, and drove a blade deep into the creature's exposed brain. It shrieked and fell dead. He stood over the corpse, his body trembling with pain and exertion, but his eyes were clear. He was a man reborn. He turned, not to the students, but to Izuku. He dropped to one knee, bowing his head in a gesture of profound, shocking fealty. The fakes must be purged, Stain declared, his voice ringing with a new, terrifying fanaticism. Society must be cleansed of the sickness of false heroes. Your will is the ultimate expression of that truth. I see that now. He looked up, his eyes burning with the fire of a convert. I am your blade. I am your judgment. I accept your offer, my sovereign. The three students could only stare in horror. The hero killer, one of the most feared villains in Japan, had just bent the knee. Not to a greater power, but to a greater ideal. Excellent, Izuku said with a nod of cold satisfaction. He had not gained a soldier. He had converted a high priest. Rise, Inquisitor. Your first duty is at hand. He turned his gaze to the three students, and for the first time, he addressed them directly. His emerald eyes seemed to weigh and measure them, and find them wanting. You have borne witness to a historical moment, he said, his voice dropping, becoming a chilling, personal threat. But this conversation was a private one. You will tell your masters, the heroes, what you saw here. You will tell them of the Nomu. But you will not speak of my Inquisitor's new allegiance. You will not speak of me. If you do, I will know. And my huntsman, he gestured to Toga, who gave the boys a sweet, bloody smile and a little wave, will be very disappointed. She has been so patient. The threat was absolute. He turned, his greatcoat swirling. Come. The fires of Hoso are a fitting pyre for the age of heroes. Let us leave them to their ashes. Izuku, his new Inquisitor Stain, and his loyal huntsman Toga simply walked away, melting into the shadows at the end of the alley. They left behind a dead Nomu, and three terrified, traumatized young men who had just learned a terrible lesson. The greatest threat to their world wasn't a monster who wanted to kill heroes. It was a king who wanted to make them irrelevant.